Hi, everybody. I'm SDEA President Mary McCorkle, and I am here with Sandra Waltman, who is our Government Relations and Communications Director. And we are blessed to have a special guest with us today for this edition of Inside the Apple. So with me today is South Dakota's Secretary of Education, Dr. Ben Jones. Welcome.
Well, thank you.
Welcome to Inside the Apple. Really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to come and do Inside the Apple and answer some questions about the Department of Ed. So we'll go ahead and get started. One of the things that we have heard a lot is the strategic plan that the Department of Education has. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. When I was named Permanent Secretary in May, the first thing I wanted to do was craft a strategic plan that was informed by the expertise within the department. And then, of course, informed by the goals and desires of the governor and of the things that she asked me to do as secretary. And a lot of the things that have been arising due to need, the various mental health and different ways to support teachers in their work. So we hired somebody who would kind of facilitate that process and so forth, and I told him I wanted to be able to listen to what the staff within the department thought about their work and what they saw in the field was a need and so forth, and how to kind of reorient that. The other thing I wanted to do was to focus on what does the department do, as opposed to the ESSA plan goals, which the previous secretaries had devised and so forth, but that became the measure of the department's work. And so with the Government Operations and Accountability Committee, they set up those parameters largely informed by the ESSA plan, which I think Secretary Shop had developed those goals just in advance of some of the ESSA plan thinking. So high school graduation, third grade reading, eighth grade math, all those kinds of things, and they had those approved by the GOE committee as their ESSA goals. When I saw that 4 or 5 years ago, I thought, well, these are interesting statistics that can be used to make things better, but I don't know how the secretary, the governor, the legislature evaluates the performance of the department, because their activities are a subset of all the things that help make those numbers, would make those numbers important. So I wanted a plan that would kind of define what it is that we do, what it is we seek to be as a department, and then with the overall goal of knowing that those ESSA plan goals, third grade reading, eighth grade math, Native American achievement, and high school, college, and career completion rates, and how those are measured in that plan is not over the horizon, but it's on the horizon to our daily work, and that we're working toward that. And that, I think, elicited a fair amount of excitement in the department. People who had seen other efforts, for whatever reason, start about a strategic plan, install, and so forth. I think it's fair to say, if you told something several times and it never happens, you might get a little frustrated about that. So there was a fair amount of, well, show me this is really going to be real. And when we had session after session of people coming and sharing their views and opinions and so forth, I think they began to see that I was serious about that. And it also took longer than I thought. But the plan was rolled out to the department in early December, and it's informed by a lot of the things that we heard from the staff. So particularly supporting the local educator was something that many people in the department thought that we could do better and more intentionally, not that we weren't doing it, but that it could be wrapped up in an understandable package that we do these things to support the local educator. Invest in talent within the department, both as an employee of the state of South Dakota and also as a professional educator. What is a career path, and how do people within the department think about their own professional development, and how do their supervisors think about developing their people? I didn't want to be the place where we're afraid to invest in our people because they might go, because if you don't invest in your people, they might stay. And then, so I'd like to invest in our people, and if they leave, to take a promotion elsewhere in state government or go back to K-12 or some other nonprofit entity or a business of their own, we should view that as a win that they were making strides in their profession. So also wanted to support the whole learner. And we talked about, in various forums, talked about wraparound services, community schools, and you've been a part of the opportunity gap work. So we're thinking about what are ways to do that. The other reason I hired that particular consultant, whose name is John Baronic, was that he showed me how he helped organizations implement their plan. I've been a part of many strategic planning processes, and you get done with it, and you shake hands and congratulate yourselves and put it on the shelf,
Yeah.
and things wander in the ditch, right? So I really liked the way he had framed that. Every initiative now has a 90-day implementation plan that says who, what, where, when, and how much. So if we're putting money against it, what the budget is for that. As we were doing that, I think we really got to a point where we were doing how much and staff time and things like that, as we'd already sent our budget off to the governor. So we were kind of too late to miss the fiscal year. But I think next year, as we think about other things and maybe develop things like the opportunity gap further, that would inform requests for DB's budget. And you can go on the website and see that. And there's a version out there that will help the public kind of understand where we are.
And we will post that link in the comment section of this Facebook Live video, so if you want to take a look at it.
Great.
And one of the things, I'm going to kind of segue into one of the things that you mentioned, and that's ESSA, the Every Student Succeeds Act. The department has been in the process of revising the state plan.
Yes.
And that is open
Public
for
comment
public
is
comment
right
until
28 this the end of the month.
yeah, end of the month.
Right.
So for those of you that would like to take a
Yes.
look at that, that's on the
Please do.
website,
Mhm.
and you can provide comments as a part of formulating the final version of the plan. And SDEA, Associated School Board,
Right.
School Administrators, we've all been
Mhm.
involved in that conversation.
And the
and-
Perkins plan as well.
Yes, and ESSA is about the state plan, but it's also about educator voice. And so we'd just really encourage you to take a look at the plan and provide some feedback. So I appreciate
That's right.
you mentioning that, because that gave me a
Mhm.
chance to get that in there too. Let's move in another direction. Part of the Blue Ribbon Task Force and the
Right.
legislation in 2016 was a half-cent sales tax, but also the establishment of a statewide mentoring
Yep.
program.
Yep.
Can you talk a little bit about how that's been going and where we are now?
Yeah, there's two staff that primarily run that program, so that the goal was to retain teachers.
Mhm.
And particularly we saw that there was, as you know, 2 or 3 years, or maybe just sometimes just one, and somebody says, I'm not feeling my way in the classroom, I'm not feeling my way in the profession, and I think something else looks better. And they leave, and we lose some talent that way, and that's unfortunate. So the goal of the law was to develop a mentoring program, particularly for districts that didn't already have one. So we've seen some districts, they have something already, and it's working well for them, great. But for those who do not, we've seen some interest that has grown over time, and it does require marrying up. So the staff in the departments spend their time finding people to be mentors, linking them up with mentees, because sometimes the school's not big enough to have the mentor in your own school. So we try not to drive 50 miles or any further than you have to, and arrange some virtual mentorship programs and so forth. And then there's the mentorship conference in late May. Well, this year was in early June, I think, just as the school year ended, which was longer for many school districts.
Yes,
than
yes,
originally
the
planned.
weather.
And in fact, the weather delayed the guest speaker coming in, who rocketed from the airport right to the podium because his plane was late. But we've seen that grow, and I was showing the figures this morning at the Joint Appropriations Committee. I think it's to the point where, it's past doubled in the 4 years it's been in existence.
I was surprised by those numbers. I
Yeah.
think we started
I
out with
was too.
150, and we were
Right.
over 100, or
500 and
Right.
500 and some.
Yeah,
That's-
well, there's some built-in doubling in the second year because you stay for 2. But
Sure,
then, so the
sure.
real growth number is year
Mhm.
3, 4, 5. and watching that up. And if you're a teacher who would love to mentor a new teacher in the profession, I would highly encourage you to look at the program.
All right.
And one of our staff members, Rich Middlestead, is one of the trainers for the program.
Okay.
And actually, back before the legislation was passed, worked with the department to begin to put that plan
Yeah.
into place. So we're grateful for all of that work. We are 2 weeks into the legislative session.
Yes.
And what are some of the Department of Education's goals for this session? I know what our goal is, but what are
Yes.
the department's goals?
Well, we had, and it kind of married nicely with the opportunity gap discussions. And so one of the initiatives in our strategic plan is to take a look at those children who are economically disadvantaged. Just looking at test scores around the country, well, around the world. I think that the John Hattie stuff and other things indicate that this is not unique to South Dakota or to the United States, but those who, kids who may not get as much exposure to language in the home in their early years, they don't get trips to the zoo, they're not taking karate lessons, this type of other stuff that happens outside the school impacts their reading, their language acquisitions, and their math and science skills. So out of that, we have the opportunity gap, which maybe we'll get to in a little bit, but has focused on the early years. I was intrigued with what I heard about the Jobs for America's Graduates Program, and some legislators toward the end of the session kind of bent my ear about that. Secretary Holtman and Department of Labor and I were at a cabinet meeting one time, and we had been part of communications about what are we going to do for next year. So we kind of, with the governor's permission, cobbled together some funds from our two departments to help it continue for one more year in the 5 school districts where it currently is. And we mentioned this to the governor, and she said, well, I need to go talk to some of the kids in the program. So we set that up. She visited Wagner High School in October, and she had a really good chat with about a dozen kids from middle school to high school in Wagner High School that talked about what the program meant for them. And then when we came to budget time, the governor made sure that was in there. So the legislatively then it's kind of a two-pronged effort. We put the FTE in our departmental request, so the governor recommends that FTE be in our budget. And there was some discussion about that at Joint Approach this morning. Also, as timing would have it, the Senate Ed took up the second prong of the effort with the bill that will delineate that there is a statewide program and also empower the Department of Education to raise private funds to facilitate the program's growth. So, and that was occurring simultaneously. So I was in Joint Approach while Laura Shivey and other members of the department were on the other side of the Capitol in the Senate Education hearing, and we got a 7-0 vote. So we rocketed out of there with unanimous approval for the program. Other members, well, Senator White had been in a previous iteration of the program on the statewide advisory board, and Senator Heiner also had been on that. So I think that was good. Where you do, where public entities raise private funds, there's always very good questions about how is that going to work, and I faced some of those this morning. I think we answered some of that. The goal is to be very transparent in how that works. So, with the ultimate goal of helping those kids who, through no fault of their own, have barriers to graduation from high school. And the coursework, the curriculum in JAG has been very promising. The results around the country and in South Dakota are too amazing to not catch your attention. And that's what got the governor's attention, and so we hope that'll catch the legislator's attention.
I was in Senate Ed this morning and heard the testimony, and there were a couple of young people out of Wagner's program, and they're just outstanding. And I've been in Wagner, and we have a couple of local leaders there who have described the program and just, and I've seen it in other school districts, And I think it's a great opportunity to help close that opportunity gap.
Yep.
So it's a great program. And the department presented its budget
We
request today.
We did. There was a recommendation not only for JAG, but for, as a part of technology in the schools, to keep some of those going. We have, so the rest of the stuff after JAG is fairly mundane, kind of procedural or programmatic things with developing databases to manage things like dual credit, which has proven to be a great opportunity for a lot of students in South Dakota. We want to be able to understand how well the program is doing for the future, and so now it's time to formalize some of the IT requirements and database management programs of that. Or other requests for things along those lines. Perkins will become something that's driving demand in career and technical education. The public comments are open for that as well, but we'll be looking for some funding to facilitate the management of that program.
Yeah. And we know that throughout session, there will be a lot of conversation about funding
Right.
as well,
Right.
coming from
Right.
a lot of education organizations, including SDEA. So we know that will be on the horizon. So you have been interim and now officially the Secretary of Education for approximately a year.
Yep.
Now, and you've traveled across the
54 weeks.
You've traveled across the state, you've visited with administrators, you've
Yeah.
talked with students, you've
Yep.
talked with educators. What are your takeaways? What are your thoughts on that first year?
Well, the first thing that strikes you is the, and I knew this. I mean, I grew up in South Dakota, went to college in South Dakota, and then I took my commission in the Air Force and was gone for 23 years. And so coming back on leave and so forth, and I have family here, so I wasn't totally detached. I kept my voter registration in South Dakota and was proud of South Dakota license plates as I was driving around Guam and Germany with my South Dakota plates. But my wife and I look forward to the opportunity to come back. And so when in the job discussions about what the job entails, in the transition team interviews, one of the interviewers said, well, all these school districts around the state, you're going to have to be, pretty close contact with them. What do you think about that? And I said, that sounds like a lot of fun. So when session was over, I started making plans about getting out there. I visited 25 school districts, 25 public school districts, 2 private schools, 2 BIE schools, and a couple of special schools. And so my last one and most recent one was Oglala Lakota School District, where they're really doing amazing things. I think I do that with the intent purpose of, I can sit in my office and look at numbers, but that's not the full story. And my training as a scholar in history and so forth, you can look at documents all day long, but there's nothing like a really good interview where you meet the person who was there to get the color and the vibe and the fidelity on what's going on. And so I visited Hutterite schools, visited tribal schools, BIE schools, Ann Sullivan Elementary in Sioux Falls, Sonia Sotomayor, schools in Rapid City, Sisseton. I've been to a couple of school board meetings to try and understand the challenges that are presented to them with managing the formula and the funding and the capital outlay and all of these things. And that's been an education. I've had really good support within the staff and the department. But there's nothing like being there, walking around the streets of Custer and having lunch in a local restaurant with the board members and finally, feeling what they're facing. And that has led to good emails afterward and fruitful discussions with that as well. So I very much don't want to be the type of secretary that's unapproachable. I'm also, for those of you who may be interested, Mary and I meet regularly and discuss issues that are common to us and how we can support teachers. And so open up those lines of communication, which is one of our strategic direction is to build relationships and maximize relationships. So that's the avenue that we're doing.
Well, and for everybody in education, it's all about the relationships.
That's right.
That's
right.
That's the measure of success is the relationships that you have in the work that you're able to do together. So I really appreciate you taking
Sure.
the time, because I know that this is with session going on and everything else, this is a crazy crazy time of year,
Yeah.
so we really appreciate your taking the time,
Yeah.
and we will let you go so that you can go on and do the work on behalf of education across the state of South Dakota. So
Thanks a lot.
thank you
Well,
again.
Thank you for
and
joining us, and
You're welcome.
we'll see you at the Capitol tomorrow, I'm sure.
Yeah, what's going on tomorrow? I gotta look.
2 bills up in
Oh,
House.
yes,
In
that's
House,
right.
they're your bills,
I
aren't
have
they?
homework to do, yes.
Or one of them at least.
Yes.
Or they both?
I have 2 bills out.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Well, we'll see you in committee.
Okay.
thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Okay, we're gonna switch gears a little bit.
All righty.
All right.
Take care.
So, what, we've just heard a lot, and again, thank you to Dr. Jones for joining us. Maybe a little longer inside the apple than we're used to, but I think that was a great conversation.
Yeah, I
and
think appreciate that.
we hope to bring you more of those conversations. So let's just transition into the legislative session. You want to talk a little bit about the 2 weeks, we're about at the end of the second week. It's been kind of quiet.
It really has. This week we had the first meeting of House Education, and then today you heard from Dr. Jones, Senate Ed, and Senate Ed had the one bill, the JAG, what we call the JAG bill, and as he said, that went flying through. Terry Nibblesek out of Huron, the superintendent, did a great presentation in House Education on test scores and the variables. In regards to test scores for school districts. Other than that, there are some bills being filed, but not a huge onslaught at this time. So we're working on the kindergarten bill, having the conversations there, and just keeping up with what's going on. And by next week, it's going to get back into the normal
Kind of
crazy routine.
More of a routine. But in the meantime, if we want to talk a little bit about lobby line,
Oh,
how
yes.
people can get
Yes.
involved.
Yes, so if you go to our website, they're on the crawler, not the crawler, because that'd be at the bottom, top of the page, we have some links that go by, and one of those has to do with lobby line. So again, sign up for lobby line. You will get any calls to action there, and there's also a tab for the legislative coffees, and my guess is that those are probably getting going now. So in your community, go to those, wear red, ask questions about education. We have Lobby Day coming up in February, the 17th and 18th, so come in on the evening of the 17th, which is the Monday of President's Day.
Yep.
We'll do some food and feed them, and they will come, so we'll have some food. And then we'll go through some legislative training, some lobbying training, what the issues are going to be, how to approach those issues, who your legislators are, and then we will start really bright and early the next day, because committees go into session at 7:45, and you'll want to talk to some legislators before session, and then in between committees. So we have that coming up. Please sign up, and that link's on our website too. And then there's tomorrow.
Yes.
Tomorrow afternoon.
So
Or morning, or whenever it is we record it.
Because Facebook and our followers don't get enough of us. We are going to start doing live updates, weekly updates. We might do some things throughout at the end of every week, whether that be Thursday or Friday, depending on their work week, Mary and I will do an update from the Capitol and just kind of go over some of the things that happened, and what you might want to expect for next week. So tune into Facebook tomorrow, probably around 10:30, depending on kind of the craziness of the Capitol, but we'll be doing an update on some of the bills that have been filed, and what we are seeing for the coming week.
And we're working on a guest too.
Yeah, and we're working on it.
That's to be determined yet, but we're working on it.
It might be whomever we grab as.
Yes, somebody that comes by.
So let's switch gears to the SDEA.
Alrighty.
Their allocation letters should be coming.
Yes, I believe they will come out towards the end of the month, the first week in February, and that will tell local leaders how many delegates they can bring to this year's RA. And I have some exciting news.
Yes, and this might be an RA that our members want to be at, so I'm.
So there's been some emails flying back and forth since last week, Thursday, and as of this morning, probably around 11, I have official confirmation that NEA President Lily Eskelsen Garcia will be our keynote speaker at the SDEA RA. She is traveling to Pier from another RA and leaving early, so she will be on the agenda early on Saturday morning. But I'm extremely excited. I put in the request for her immediately after last year's RA, and yeah, that's really exciting. So she'll be here.
So look for your allocation letters and mark your calendars for April 3rd and 4th. NEA President Lily Eskelsen Garcia will be here, and so that's pretty exciting.
Yeah.
Couple quick things to touch on before we let everybody check out. We have some scholarship deadlines coming up.
Oh yes, February 15th, the Gordon Horgan Memorial Scholarship for Native American students who are interested in a career in education, either high school seniors or college sophomores, and the Ramia Boersma Scholarship, also for high school seniors and college sophomores. The key to Ramia Boersma is that the applicant must be the child of a member or the grandchild of a member. That's not true of the Gordon Horgan, but it is true of the Ramia Boersma. So as you share this, make sure that applicants understand those two qualifications. It's because we want to be able to award the scholarships, but if we get scholarships in with people who don't meet that criteria, then we can't award those scholarships. So really encourage you to share that and talk to your school counselors, etc.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about Read Across America. This is usually the time of the year when people start to wonder what's going on with Read Across America. And Read Across America has changed.
Yes.
It is more of a year-round campaign. Do you want to talk a bit about the year-round campaign?
Yes. Read Across America, as Sandra said, is now a year-round campaign focusing on diverse readers and books that celebrate diversity. And if you get a chance to see the Read Across America calendar, you'll notice that the logo has changed and all of the books are featured on a monthly basis. And in the Advocate that is just going out, there are hidden symbols. And if you find that symbol and send it in an email, or send in that you found it in an email, one of the things that we're going to use for prizes are some of the books from the last 2 years, diversity calendars for Read Across America. So that's going to be kind of our approach, is that we read across America all year and we celebrate diversity through the program. And so that's kind of the approach that we're going to be using.
Okay. Couple quick opportunities for professional development. The 2020 Tri-State Summit.
Yes.
You want to talk briefly about that?
Incredibly exciting. We have a NEA grant with Nebraska, and there have been conversations going on between the professional development staff people in South Dakota, so that'd be Rich Middlestead, and in Nebraska and Iowa, along the lines of how to address disruptive student behaviors. It ties into the trauma-informed work, but we're going to be hosting a tri-state event. It's going to be in Sioux City. It is on March 7th, and it's a 6-hour event, and you can register on our website, and it is going to be a wonderful opportunity to network with colleagues from 3 states on March 7th, Saturday, March 7th.
Okay, and then don't forget the Donna Beagle Breaking the Iron Cage of Poverty seminar that we're going to be putting on March 28th.
Yep.
In Chamberlain, and you can find that on our website. Is there anything else we're forgetting?
I don't think so. We've covered a whole wide range of topics. Again, we want to say thank you to Secretary of Education Ben Jones for joining us and for the work that he's doing on behalf of education across the state of South Dakota. And just remind you to check in tomorrow for the week wrap-up from the Capitol. Have a good weekend and keep on keeping on. Thank you for everything you do for your students.
Thanks for watching.